Hello everybody, another installment in my little mini series about engines, and the final one for now from Audi. I couldn't come here and not talk about the V10, could I? V10s are such an odd engine. They are more complicated and larger than a V8, but nowhere near as smooth, luxurious or decadent as a V12. They are, in the grand scheme of things, very rare indeed, and most of the cars which have had one as their source of power have been known, if for no other reason than for that choice of engine. Think about it. The Dodge Viper, the Lexus LFA, the Porsche Carrera GT. You cannot have a conversation about those cars without talking about that engine. And so it is the case for this, the Audi R8. Now, a lot of manufacturers will have chosen the V10 thanks in part to its motorsports pedigree. The golden age of Formula One, as far as I'm concerned, was dominated by the use of the 3-litre V10. Its peak came in 2003 when BMW produced a version of that engine making over 900 horsepower at a scarcely believable 19,200 RPM. Now, that no doubt was their excuse to build a V10. But I'm not quite sure where Audi got the idea, because they definitely didn't build a Formula One car. In 2003, Lamborghini unleashed the Gallardo on the world, something that went on to become their best-selling product ever. Now, you have to remember that back then, Ferrari's main car was the 360, and that had at its core the wonderfully characterful, but also very old, Dino engine. Therein, 3.6-litre trim producing 400 horsepower from its V8. The Gallardo had 2 more cylinders, 1.4 litres more capacity, and another 100 horsepower. And that's quite a difference. However, for everyone out there that's ever told somebody that their S6, S8 or RS6 has a Lamborghini Gallardo engine in it, I'm afraid I have to disappoint you. That 5-litre stands alone. It is an orphan engine. It is totally unrelated to anything either before or after. I'm not sure exactly where it came from, but the one thing I can tell you is that the 5.2 litre which replaced it was very much an Audi engine. Compared with the Lamborghini unit, this engine has a different capacity, different internal dimensions, different materials, it has direct injection, it has different bore spacing. It is completely different. So where did this one come from? That is a slightly easier question to answer. It is a very close relation in many ways to the high-rev concept engine as used in the B7 RS4, and it shares basically all of its internal dimensions with that engine. The difference being there's just more of it. The original 5-litre Gallardo unit has something of a reputation for fragility, but you cannot say that about this. The engine here is allegedly identical to what Audi put in their GT3 cars, and it's for that exact reason that the R8 might live on for a few years yet, because that's a very popular customer racing program, and in order to homologate those cars, you have to have a road version. But more than that, these things are extremely popular with tuners. Allegedly, the stock drivetrain is good for about 900 horsepower. So if it isn't a relation of the Lamborghini unit, where did Audi's V10 come from then? Audi must have known that BMW were about to drop a V10 into one of their road cars, because the S6, RS6 and S8 all gained V10 engines at a similar time. The lower capacity 5-litre in the RS6 was achieved through the reduction of stroke in that engine, and the shared capacity is probably one of the reasons people think the car has a Lamborghini engine in it. Alongside this, the R8 was incoming. Audi already had a version of their high-revving V8 ready for it, but they wanted something more. A turbo was considered briefly, but decided against because it wouldn't fit the character of that kind of car. A V12 would have been too bulky, but a V10 fit the bill and was a nice nod to Audi's past and their love of 5-cylinder engines. Whilst they could have taken the existing 5-litre Lamborghini unit, as they already owned Lamborghini by that time, evidently bosses at Audi decided it wasn't up to the standards of the brand and so chose to make their own. The development work was already underway or done for the low-revving V10 seen in the saloons and events, and the Lambo and R8 unit was created by combining a version of that engine with bespoke heads and internals inspired by the higher rev concept V8 as in the RS4 and the early R8. That engine could then replace the Italian-designed V10 in the Gallardo, meaning that Volkswagen's two supercars were now powered by thoroughly German engines meeting Audi's very high standards.
Now this beautiful LMX produces about 570 horsepower, but it's also essentially the same engine that exists in the current R8 and Huracan, where it produces 630. What I find most fascinating about this engine is the ratio of it. Now, engine ratio is something that's quite important to geeky types like me, and that refers to the relationship between an engine's bore and its stroke, i.e. how wide is the piston versus how far does it travel up and down. Typically, a high revving engine will be very over square, so it'll be wider than it is tall, if you will. This one isn't. Now, to give you an idea, this has a bore of 84.5mm, the same as every single Audi V8 ever made, and a stroke of 92.8, the same as every Audi V8 ever made that was a 4.2. The BMW M5 has a bore of 92mm versus the 84.5 in this, and a stroke of just 75.2 versus the 92 here. Now, it's a slightly smaller engine, 5 litres versus 5.2, but that is an absolutely massive difference.
What is the significance of that ratio anyway? Broadly speaking, engines which are under square, like in the R8, have greater low-down torque, but they aren't built to rev. Look at some motorbike engines. They have double the bore versus the stroke because they need all the power they can get, but they don't need the torque. When long-stroke engines try and rev, their piston speed gets close to what physics will allow pretty quickly, meaning that everything has to be built to insanely high standards just to stop the whole thing flying apart. To give you an idea of what I mean, the pistons in a Ferrari Enzo travel at just shy of 4,000 feet per minute. The BMW V10 in the M5 is just over 4,000. The legendary Honda S2000 is just shy of 5,000 feet a minute. The R8's V10 in current spec at 8,700 RPM has a piston speed of 5,300 feet per minute. That's 88.3 feet per second. When you combine that with this thing's ludicrous durability, that is what makes it a truly legendary engine.
Perhaps the strangest thing about this engine is that it is a crazy, large capacity, multi-cylinder beast with an amazing soundtrack that is totally out of place in 2020. And yet, the company that it comes from is Audi, who have a reputation for being masters of turbocharging and perhaps a little bit boring. But that right back there is proof that when they want to be, those crazy Germans are really anything but. And I have to say, a few years ago, I never really used to like the first gen R8. But if there's one reason to stick with it, it is that engine. I'll take mine in a manual. Thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed. Please like, comment below. That is the last piece here from Audi UK. Hope you've enjoyed the engine series. I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.